In this video, we're going to take a look at three overridden activity methods for our slideshow class. And we're going to look specifically at onCreat options menu, which gets called when the user touches the menu button on the device while viewing this activity. We're going to look at onOptions item selected, which gets called when the user selects one of the menu items that's displayed. And then finally, we're going to take a look at a third method named onActivityResult, which, as you'll see shortly, gets called when another activity that we launch from here returns back to this activity. So of course, when the user touches the menu button on the device, we're going to call onCreat options menu, and we will then inflate the menu for the slideshow. This menu, as you saw during the test drive, contains one menu option for adding a new slideshow. When the user touches that menu option, onOptions item selected gets called. Now, just before onOptions item selected, we have a final static integer called edit ID, which you'll see how we use momentarily. Basically, we're going to be using it as part of launching the slideshow editor activity. Now, when the user says that they want to add a new slideshow, we're going to display for them a customized alert dialog that allows the user to enter the name of the new slideshow. And to do that, at lines 83 and 84, we first get a reference to the layout inflator object. And at lines 87 through 89, we then inflate the slideshow name edit text layout that we created to display inside of an alert dialog. So we go ahead and inflate that. We assign to the final variable name edit text the reference to that edit text, and we made it a final variable, by the way, because it's going to be used inside of an anonymous inner class, and that's just a requirement of Java. At line 92, we create the new alert dialog.builder object, and we set its view to this custom view object that we inflated up above. So you can basically put any view you want into an alert dialog by calling the setView method. We also set the title on the dialog, and then we set up the positive buttons event handler to, in this case, launch the activity for the slideshow editor. So let's go ahead and scroll down and take a look at the positive button setup. As you can see here, we're creating a new dialog interface.onClickListener. And when its onClick method gets called, because the user touches the so-called positive button in this dialog, meaning they really do want to go ahead and create the slideshow, the first thing we do is obtain from the name edit text the string that the user typed. And for our limited error checking in this app, we're going to just make sure that the length of that name is not 0 characters, because we want to make sure that every slideshow has at least one character in its name. At line 106, assuming that's the case, we go ahead and add a new slideshow info object for that name to our slideshow list. So this is now the setup of creating a new slideshow. And the next thing we need to do is display for the user the slideshow editor activity, so the user can start adding images and music to the slideshow. And to do that, we're going to create an intent for launching the slideshow editor activity from the slideshow activity. At line 112, we put an extra piece of information into that intent, specifically the key value pair name extra with the name of the slideshow, and this is telling the slideshow editor activity which slideshow needs to be edited. And then we have a new feature here. Previously, we've seen how to launch another activity with the start activity method. Here we're using the so-called start activity for result method. And we're going to be launching the activity that's represented by the edit slideshow intent. The second argument is a request ID, and basically what it does is, if your activity can launch several other activities, for each one you would pass a different positive integer value in as the second argument, and that allows us to distinguish between the activities as they return back to this activity. Now in this particular app, we're only launching one other activity, so edit ID, which we set up above here to be the value 0, is simply set to 0 because I just don't need to know which activity is coming back. There is only one that will return back to me in this app, and that in this case is the slideshow editor activity. On the other hand, if I were launching 3 other activities, I might set up 3 different constants with the values, let's say 1, 2, and 3, and I can then use those values in the onActivityForResult method to figure out which of the activities is actually returning to me, and that may help me determine how to process the result that's being returned. Now, the result that's going to be returned in this case is simply the fact that we're coming back from the slideshow editor activity rather, and I'm then going to need to update what is displayed on the slideshow's list view to include information about the new slideshow that was just created. So we start activity4result so that when the result is returned, we can then process that result. Now, if the name of our slideshow is equal to 0, we're going to display a little toast to the user indicating that the slideshow has to have a name. We also configure for our dialog a negative button with the null value for its event handler, simply saying if they hit the cancel button that we should dismiss the dialog. And then finally, the other key piece in this video that we wanted to talk about is this special method onActivityForResult. The first argument that we receive in this method is the request code that is passed as the second argument to start activity4result. And again, this is how we would distinguish between the possibility of multiple different activities that could be launched from the slideshow. In this case, we only have the slideshow editor being launched from this point. So our onActivityForResult method, or I'm sorry, onActivityResult method does not use the request code in this case, but if we had multiple activities that could be returning to us, we could use a switch statement with that request code to figure out which activity just returned to us and therefore how to process what's coming back. Now, in this particular case, all we need to do is update the list view for our slideshow subclass of list activity, and to do that we're simply going to tell the slideshow adapter that its data set has changed, and this in turn will automatically repopulate the list view on the screen.